persons of quality, and welcome to the Chapter 8 Scarlet Letter video lecture. This is the same day as I'm recording the Period 7, or at least the beginning of this. And the real goal is for you to just use the notes, look at the themes, and to track the main ideas. Of course, each of these videos will be attached to some sort of formative assessment so that I can make sure that you're going through and writing these materials in your notes. So when you're looking at your text, look at the initial description of Governor Bellingham as it appears in the text. So right away at the beginning of Chapter 8, it says, that he dresses in the antiquated fashion of King James's reign, and his head looked like, quote, that of John the Baptist in a charger. So Bellingham is given this almost tragic presentation, that he is behind the times, that he represents a Puritan age gone by, and that he's very much the sacrificial lamb of the community. Now, this is the first 4 lines of the chapter. The wide circumference of an elaborate ruff beneath his gray beard, in the antiquated fashion of King James's reign, caused his head to look not a little like that of John the Baptist in a charger. So, John the Baptist on a plate. I just find that to be an incredibly interesting description of the governor of the Puritan community. Not the minister, so he doesn't have the religious authority, but again, still a hugely significant idea. It goes on and it describes his behavior, describes his appearance. So again, if I look in that exact same paragraph, but it is an error to suppose that, and though unfeignedly prepared to sacrifice goods and life at the behest of duty, made it a matter of fact to reject some means of comfort or even luxury as lay fairly within their grasp. What an interesting idea, and yes, I know I skipped a line, but we're talking about Puritans who are absolutely living in the lap of luxury, who have all the resources that make them antithetical, T-H-E-T-I-C-A-L, antithetical to the types of religious human beings the Puritans are called on to be. The old clergyman, nurtured at the rich bosom of the English church, had a long established and legitimate taste for all good and comfortable things. And however stern he might show himself in the pulpit, or in his public reproof of such transgressions as that of Hester Prynne, still the genial benevolence of his private life had won him warmer affection than was accorded to any of his professional contemporaries. So I'm going over the text in this lecture because I think these are some really important, specific things that contradict what the Puritans were all about and sets up a really good opportunity for irony for us in this particular novel. So again, I think this is very, very important. Now, in my notes, I wrote down, discuss the contrast of who Bellingham claims to be and the material wealth of his home and the material wealth of how he is or how he conducts himself. So I find this clash of 2 ideas incredibly significant. And as I wrote down in my notes, how is this conflict, this contrast, important thematically in the Scarlet Letter? So if I look again at the end of that first paragraph in the chapter, and again, I'm looking at the hypertext behind the video, that idea that no matter what he might show himself in the pulpit or in his public reproof of such transgressions, his private life won him warmer affection than was accorded to any of his professional contemporaries. You need to make sure that you're noting that and you have a really good idea of how that functions in your text. Again, I find these to be incredibly significant ideas as we move forward. Now, again, if you can see my notes, this is very much what I had at the top of my goldenrod sheet of paper. I also find it significant here in Chapter 8 how when at the governor's house we look at Arthur Dimmesdale and Chillingworth and how they address Pearl, how they engage themselves in conversation with her, how they're incredibly, it's almost like they're incredibly judgmental, but it's also like they don't understand what's going on. So if you go to the paragraph that begins, "What have we here?" said Governor Bellingham, looking with surprise at the scarlet little figure before him. It's very significant that Pearl is dressed all in red in this chapter. And again, that ties into all of the conversation that we've had about the significance of color, the red of passion, the emotion as opposed to logic idea in this novel. He says, "I profess I have never seen the like since my days of vanity, in old King James's time, when I was wont to esteem it a high favor to be admitted to a court masque." A masque is, of course, a dance. It's a big ball. "There used to be a swarm of these small apparitions in holiday time, and we called them children of the Lord of Misrule. But how gat such a guest into my hall?" How very, very significant that he used to call these children the Lord of Misrule. I think that has a tremendous opportunity for you to do some, at least thinking about why that might be important and why that's significant. How Pearl is specifically designed to be disruptive, to take the plot as we know it and really shake it up and provide a significant challenge to Dimmesdale and Chillingworth's characters. That idea, the children that they called the Lord of Misrule, very, very significant to me in my understanding of what's going on. Another piece of the text that I think is really important is if you skip down a paragraph where it says pearl, ruby rather, or coral, or red rose, at the very least, judging from thy hue, responded the old minister, putting forth his hand in a vain attempt to pat little Pearl on the cheek. There's a couple things here. Of course, it's the idea that Pearl is this vibrant, red-hued young lady who cannot be tamed, who cannot be controlled. But more significant here is the idea that Dimmesdale tried very much to reach out and touch this fragile flower. It's almost like if he touches Pearl on the cheek, on the head, whatever, it's going to make everything okay. It's going to make everything extraordinarily significant in his life and in where all of this is going. So again, lots and lots of context here happening in this. So we describe Pearl, but then say, how is it possible that she's connected with Hester Prynne? And the governor says, "Sayest thou so? Nay, we might have judged that such a child's mother must needs be a scarlet woman and a worthy type of her of Babylon. But she comes at a good time, and we will look into this matter forthwith." He says she is a harlot. She is the worst kind of woman. He says extraordinarily unkind things about her by connecting her to Babylon and making a comment again about her scarlet character. But then he says, you know what? I probably need to go over and talk about this. So there's the opportunity. Bellingham stepped through the window into the hall, followed by his three guests. Now, of course, the fact that Chillingworth and Dimmesdale are there also, I find to be incredibly important. So he starts to go after Hester Prynne, but she becomes extraordinarily defiant. As the minister is critical, as he starts paying attention to really what he's going to make Hester an example of, I find all of this incredibly important. If you skip down 4 paragraphs or so, we see Hester's reaction. Hester, and I just lost it, there we go. Hester caught hold of Pearl and drew her forcibly into her arms, confronting the old Puritan magistrate with almost a fierce expression. Alone in the world, cast off by it, and with this sole treasure to keep her heart alive, she felt that she possessed indefeasible rights against the world and was ready to defend them to the death. So, significant movement in the development of Hester Prynne's character. I think there's not going to be another time in this novel where she's going to just take this abuse. She stands up to protect her child and to protect her relationship with the child. And I think this is an unbreakable bond Hester can't go back from this. We've now significantly developed her character. And I can prove that with, at this wild and singular appeal, 2 paragraphs down, which indicated Hester Prynne's situation had provoked her to little less than madness. The overflow of passion and the overflow of emotion. The young minister at once came forward, pale, and holding his hand over his heart, as was his custom. Whenever he was nervous, temperament was thrown into agitation. Whenever he is around his lover, Hester, and his daughter, Pearl, he has this almost breakdown in his character. And again, incredibly important. This shows Hester's defiance is going to put Dimmesdale in a position where he must now do something significant. He's being forced to become a better character and to really address his own situations in life and why they are significant. Now, that's all well and good. You can do a ton of analysis in these 3 or 4 paragraphs in developing Arthur Dimmesdale. But I think it's also significant to look at the reaction of Roger Chillingworth. Dimmesdale says, "The little baggage hath witchcraft in her, I profess," said he to Dimmesdale. I misspoke. Chillingworth comes in and criticizes Pearl to Dimmesdale. "She needs no old woman's broomstick to fly withal. A strange child," remarked Roger. "It's easy to see the mother's part in her. Would it be beyond a philosopher's reach, think ye, gentlemen, to analyze that child's nature, and from it make a mold, to give a shrewd guess at the father?" Again, we're looking at Chillingworth singularly focused on finding, or at least revealing, Dimmesdale. But more important, look at all this stuff that's being said about Pearl as a character. A strange child. The little baggage hath witchcraft in her, I profess. Because Chillingworth can't comprehend the overflow of emotion and the dynamic character of Pearl, he blames it on witchcraft. And he falls back on his crutch, where he goes out of his way to pin it on the potential father. And again, I find these to be extraordinarily important kinds of ideas. Look at the last 3 paragraphs. "Make my excuse to him, so please you," answered Hester with a triumphant smile. "I must tarry at home and keep watch over my little Pearl. Had they taken her from me, I would willingly have gone with thee into the forest, and signed my name in the devil's book too, and that with mine own blood. Hester Prynne emerges here in Chapter 8 as a wholly defiant individual character. She fights for her daughter. She stands up against Roger Chillingworth, and she becomes a defined heroine. But I think, oddly, the novel shifts away from Hester Prynne at this point. The second to last paragraph. "We shall have thee there anon," said the witch lady, frowning as she drew back her head. Hester Prynne is clashed with the crazy old Mistress Hibbins, who is supposedly fully given over to the devil. But here, if we suppose this interview between Hibbins and Prynne to be authentic and not a parable, was already an illustration of the young minister's argument against sundering the relationship of a fallen mother to the offspring of her frailty. Even thus early had the child saved her from Satan's snare. How tremendously significant that Pearl saves her mother from damnation. It's the child that brings redemption to the mother. Again, this is extraordinarily significant, I think, because when you look at the development of Hester Prynne, at some point, she needed help. At some point, she needed a strong character to come along and help her with that. It was not going to be the sad and pathetic Dimmesdale, but again, just like your characteristics of American Romanticism, that character becomes the child. The character becomes that one that has the most impact and is most significant in that development, and that's going to be Pearl. So clearly by Chapter 8, we have the evolution and the development of Pearl as a dynamic character. We see the shift in Hester Prynne, and we begin to see Dimmesdale standing up and making a contribution to everything that's going on. I think we're absolutely primed for significant development and changes in this novel. So stay tuned to that as we move forward.